Buenas tardes. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to say I guess I'm used to walking around, so is this going to re-echo or? Okay.
For the camera.
Okay. Oh, for the camera. Wonderful. Okay. Wow. So I first wanted to say thank you. It is an honor to be invited for a conversation that is from the perspective of the strength in diversity and the strength in partnerships. We're a small group, and so I stood up because I saw the camera, but would it make more sense for me to be sitting down because we're a small group? Okay, that's great. I'm wondering if we could begin with introductions of who's in the room. You got to hear a little bit about me and would love to know who's here.
Hi, my name is Rami, and I am a research scholar at Northwestern University, doing research in surgery.
Rami.
My name is Abdul. Doing research at Northwestern too.
I'm sorry.
My name is Abdul. I'm doing some cancer research in Northwestern.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you for doing the research.
I'm Hamza Rice. I'm a medical graduate. I'm looking towards doing postgraduate training in the US.
Great. In what area?
Internal medicine.
Internal medicine. Great.
Well, I'm Ahmed Awida, a physician from Egypt. I'm doing cancer research in Northwestern University.
As well. Great. As a cancer survivor, it's great to see two folks here. Great.
My name is Amir. I'm an international medical graduate. I'm doing my medicine medical license exam.
Great.
Okay, I'm Himati. I'm a speaker and consultant on interfaith and intercultural work. Happy to have you here.
Great. Thank you.
Aliou Tarash, interim president of the college.
Great. Thank you.
My name is Irma Cabello. I work at the American Islamic College and fundraising, and I have my degree in political government studies.
Great.
My name is Ibrahim Cheshkar. I am the coordinator for FEBA, which is Federation of Balkan American Association for Balkan People. And here, hopefully here.
My name is Yıldız Nedire. I'm a student at West University, and my major is business.
Great. Wonderful. Well, and once again, thank you. Do we?
I'm Rana.
Hi, Rana.
I'm a sociology student.
Great. Wonderful.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise, likewise. So once again, it truly is an honor to be here and to have the opportunity to have a conversation. I prepared some remarks, but I think I was hoping to once say a few things, but make this also conversational, if it's okay with you. So my original conversation, as we looked at, if I'm coming to the American Islamic University or college, what comes to mind, right? And so to me, the first thing that comes to mind working in the work that I do, and I'll tell you what I guess you should know. The organization is Mujeres Latinas en Accion, Latin Women in Action. We're a women's organization, and what I mean by that is not that we only serve women. We provide services to women and families, but we do it with a woman's lens and a family lens. So we work with fathers and we work with sons, but the focus is around targeting women in the community. And so I thought to myself, when I think of the Islamic community, the first that comes to mind is an organization that I've had the pleasure of working with, which is the Arab American Family Center out of Bridgeview. They've started the organization right around the same time that I started working at the organization that I work at. And so I refer back to Itadel and her wonderful personality and so very welcoming. So I right away said, of course, I'll be more than happy to come because I've had nothing but the most wonderful relationship with this organization. But what I wanted to talk to you about was specifically around demographics. And I shared with the president earlier what the demographics has meant to me as an individual personally. I grew up in the southwest suburbs, and I think the southwest suburbs are a really good example of the changes that have happened in the Chicagoland area that are also a reflection of the changes that are taking place across the country. When we first came to this country in 1973, and by the way, it was meant to be short term. My parents said they only brought us for a couple of years, and then we were going to go back to Mexico, where my family's from. That was 1973. We're still here. so that was not the case.
How old were you?
Also, you want to add the dates, but it's okay. I have no problem with that. I was 5 years old in 1973. And so I came into basically in the midst of kindergarten, and have had my education in this country up until high school, when my parents did decide to go back to Mexico, and it was a culture shock for me. But what happened in the since 1973 to this year in 2013, when I first came to Summit, I was one of 3 Latino children in school. And one of the other ones was my sister. You go there now, and it's about 80% Latino. We also saw a huge growth within the Muslim community in that area. So it used to be a pretty much Eastern European community, and then you saw the changes taking place. So what's happening in this city, in this country, is we could either embrace it and work together, understanding each other, or we could work in silos. So what I wanted to do was share some data, and it's good to know that we've got some researchers here, and begin with the landscape and how it's changing and will continue to change dramatically. So at the end of 2011, there were 23 million Latinos of Latin American origin who are U.S. citizens 18 years of age or older. And there will be 500,000 new voters turning 18 every year for the next 12 years, at least. Another way to look at it is every month for the next 2 decades, 50,000 Latinos will turn 18, becoming eligible to vote. So I mentioned the elections as something important because, as we know, we just had major elections in November, and things shifted dramatically as a result of those elections. I also want to talk to you about the most popular names in the U.S. What do you think the most popular names are in the U.S.?
Richard, Daniel,
The last name. Besides Smith.
Matt, Smith, Johnson,
Well,
Richardson.
nope. Garcia has now become number 8. Garcia. Rodriguez is the 9th.
Rodriguez.
Martinez, the 11th. Hernandez, the 15th. Lopez, the 21st. And Gonzalez, the 23rd. And I had to throw in Gonzalez because that's my maiden name. So as I mentioned, the elections took place in November and showed indeed the power of the Latino vote, because we certainly, one thing is having the numbers, and the other is turning out to vote. And amongst them, the highest number of voters were women, Latina women. In general, when you think of elections, it is women in this country who come out to vote at the biggest number. Why is this important? It's important because, as we know, women, when you think of your mom, is she not the one who probably makes the decisions for you related to your medical? I mean, you folks here in the medical. So here, I know I'm the one who has to remember to make the doctor's appointments. My husband is a wonderful partner, but those are the things that women do. My son will turn to me and say, actually it was my son who told me, Mom, you're speaking at the American Islamic College tomorrow. I said, yes, I am. He goes, oh, I've got an appointment, I can't come. And so, how did you know? And so you all did a great job of social media. But my son does depend on certain things, decisions that take place, that women make many of the economic decisions in the home. And I remember, I don't know if any of you saw the movie called My Fat Greek Wedding, where the woman says, the husband is the head, but the woman is the neck, and we could turn that head wherever we want, right? So I share this because the perspective I give, of course, is very much from a woman's perspective, running a women's organization, and having a wonderful son, and having a wonderful partner, my husband, who has been very supportive and very important in the work that we do. So as I mention the women's vote, I also want to share with you what is also taking place related to immigration or to immigrant issues. So let me just stop and focus here in Illinois. A few years ago, we had a really difficult time from an organizational perspective working with anyone out, certain parties on even bringing up issues related to the immigrant community. Whether it was from medical reasons, like the All Kids, for example, that is a part of Illinois. Are you familiar with All Kids? Yeah. So the All Kids at one point was on the verge of being chopped. Now we have two parties, including the most conservative individuals, understanding the importance of supporting something as important as healthcare for children and immigrant children as well. So I think that is happening again because of the numbers, but more importantly because of the work that has taken place as far as elections go. So let me step back a little bit more and talk about I mentioned the numbers and the national scope. And now let me focus on the Chicago area. So in the Chicago metropolitan area, we went from 8.2 million to, there are from 8.2 to 8.4 million residents between 2000 and 2010. There was a 3.6% increase, right, of within the past decade. The Latino population, so that's in general, there was an increase, that's the increase of the population. During the past decade, the Latino population grew from 1.4 million to 1.8 million residents, a 29.5% increase. So the growth in the residents, Latino residents, was actually greater than the region's overall population, which was the growth of, I'm sorry, my nose back. Which was indeed a growth in general. So while the Latino population has continued to grow by 3% in the city of Chicago, in the suburban Cook County, which I've referred to a few times, it grew by 46.5%. So I mean, just imagine the growth of one particular community. In Kendall County, there was a full 40 miles southwest of Chicago, which is a full 40 miles of Chicago. Latino numbers increased by 338%. So those numbers are important. But now let me go back to, and I know I can't specifically bring out the Arabic numbers because as we spoke, they're still looked at as white with the census, but I will break down a few others. In the Asian American population in the Chicago metropolitan area grew by 39%. More than 580,000 Asian Americans and nearly 10,000 native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders now live in the Chicago area. So, the 2010 census revealed that the city of Chicago itself lost 17%. So the population went down. Of its black population between 2000 and 2010, while the entire Chicago region gained black population at a modest rate of 4%. So in the city of Chicago, the African American population has gone down, and around the region, it's only increased at a rate of 4%. So we've witnessed the growth of African communities in the south and southwest suburbs, is where that has taken place. So what does this mean? Latinos and African Americans, Asians, we have mainstream concerns, right? When you think of the various diverse communities, while we might have be here a student at Northwestern, or what we might be someone in public relations, no matter what our background is, we have mainstream concerns. And so many times, our communities are siloed. What are some of these issues? Housing is important to us. Education is important to us. Health is important to us. Obviously, jobs, but also civic involvement. So as we talk about these areas, if we talk about them in silos, then we're not getting anywhere. And so the importance of bridge building, the importance of engaging cross-cultural communities is important, but also understanding the needs that we all each share and how we have commonalities. So I mentioned one of the things that we're currently working on as an organization earlier before we started the formal conversation. Comprehensive immigration reform is very important to our community. We have mixed status families, families who have been here, who were brought here at the age of 2 or as babies and are now DREAM students and might qualify for the deferred action, but they also have parents who could be on the verge of being deported. We have mixed status families who have U.S. citizen children and mixed status parents. And we also know the vulnerability of not having comprehensive immigration reform. What we have found in our, amongst the families that we serve is that the issue of healthcare becomes important, the issue of where you can live becomes important, but also your vulnerability within the workforce is obviously, if you're undocumented, we know of individuals who are being paid below minimum wage. And so in order for there to be equity, we need to move this forward. And so many times when someone thinks of immigration reform, which is an issue that we're working on, they think of Mexicans south of the border coming to the US, or guard the border because, you know, God forbid, the wrong person comes in through that border. And so what we found is that it's an issue that is more relevant to the issue of equity from a woman's lens. And so when we look at immigration from a woman's lens, and so, you know, again, I'm a woman, I work at a women's organization, and so I'm back on the discussion of immigration reform. So 51% of immigrants in this country are women. So the majority of immigrants in this country, being naturalized citizens, being here as students visa, are women. And so the dynamics change. Yet at the same time, comprehensive immigration reform is not looked at from that lens. So I talked about the importance of partnerships and allies. And so recently, we started working with, one of the examples is women who have been involved with women's rights, who aren't necessarily, many of them are probably individuals we would have never worked with before. But when we made that change twist it from a conversation to be more of social justice and equity, we have individuals who are now very interested in having this conversation. So, and why? Because female immigrants are our mothers, they're our sisters, they're our daughters, and friends. And obviously, they have come to this country for the same reason that many immigrants came before. So one of the things that that we hope to do, and I think we have this campaign that I talked about of different backgrounds that include women from African American descent, that are non-immigrant women, that are women in the health field, that are women who are interested in this, who are working with us on this campaign. So as we move forward, we certainly, as I mentioned, it is a very important issue, and I could have discussed many other areas of discussions of the work that we do at Mujeres, but I wanted to focus on that because that is has become an example of partnership work that we're doing. We're also, in the month of some of the work that our organization does is a great deal of research, and I have one example of the Latina portraits that we've got here. There is another one that we did recently, which is the Latina Portraits on the Violence Against Women Act. And there's also a Latina portrait study that we did related to healthcare and health disparities amongst Latina women. So that might be of particular interest to some of you. But again, I could keep talking, and I'd rather have the dialogue and see, did any of this spark? What do you all think of what I just said? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. I actually have a question.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you said, or a lot of the things that you say, are really, really interesting, and I think are really parallel to the experiences of different Muslim communities, of which there are many. There are some who are more established, who've been in this country for several generations, including people from immigrant backgrounds, and then people who are just new immigrants and are newly beginning to institutionalize. But going back to your question of building alliances, I come from a background where, that's what I do, is I build alliances among people from different religious backgrounds. And I wanted to maybe get a sense from you how you deal with issues that come up around the table that aren't necessarily about like comprehensive immigration reform and building building coalitions around what you have in common. But then, for instance, something like, actually, I'll give you a concrete example. When I work with Muslim feminists around the country and around the world, actually, each one of us has a different definition of what feminism is, but essentially we agree that we want to work within the framework of our religious understanding and, get freedom and choices as women. However, we sometimes run into people who should be our allies, but are not, because they have a certain understanding of what feminism is. And so I wanted to maybe get from you a sense of how do you build coalitions, how do you build relationships with people who should be your allies, but there's something that's sort of sticking in the mud there that's making it difficult.
Sure. So on the various coalitions that we've been a part of, and our organization is a part of several coalitions, we have leads, or I should say, our entire staff is somehow involved with some kind of coalition building, other than our receptionists and housekeeping. But every program staff and even our development staff and communication staff are involved with that. And what I mean by that is that they are a part of different organizational membership organizations or roundtable groups. And that is important because the issue of trust has to be present in order to build a coalition. And so you start with, how do you build trust? You build trust with knowing each other, right? So I mentioned the Arab American Family Services, Itadel, who we've worked with on several campaigns, but it didn't just start overnight. It happened because we met, we shared what we had in common, we talked about similar challenges, and it turned out we had very similar challenges in our community, and so we've been able to address them. One of the other ways one of the other things that I found is really important is that knowing, doing the one-on-ones within various communities, and sometimes getting out of our comfort zone and being introduced by someone to another group. So, for example, in this campaign that we're working on, who are women feminists, and I say this because normally women feminists, they weren't on this conversation, but it took a few women to introduce, to share, to work with them on, this is important, now introduce me to other people that should know this. And you invite them and bring them to the table. And we now have women from all different backgrounds who usually aren't at the table coming together because key people brought them, right? So I think, you know, in general, the importance is around building allies or building partnerships are based on people. And we have to be able to link to those people and create those relationships. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does make a lot of sense. Maybe like a part 2 of this conversation is maybe, if you can maybe shed some light on how you were able to get people who are from a more conservative political background to join you. I mean, aside from the numbers game, which is I think probably what Republicans are thinking about, right? Those 50,000 young Latinos who are becoming voters every month. But aside from that, like what else? I mean, how else have you been able to get people who politically might not agree with you, but have come to agree that this is a social justice issue rather than
So different people come for different reasons, right, to the table. Some of them because there is a business relationship and with someone who they were invited to. Some people, some are, this is truly a social justice issue. Others, if I'm not in this conversation, I am out of the loop. So people come for various reasons, but what is important is who asked them to come to that circle. Did the right person ask them to be a part of that? So, do you know how my son found out about this through Ortsetic, which is a program through the Jewish Council of Urban Affairs, JCUA. My son, we're not Jewish. He has friends that are part of Ortsetic, and so they shared it with him, saying, "Oh, that's your mom. She's speaking." So we're all related and interconnected in one way or another. It's finding those places where we're interconnected and strengthening them to outreach to others. And I think that many times we talk to ourselves and we don't get out of those zones to build those allies. So I find it very comfortable to talk to other women because I work with women's groups all the time. And I have found the importance of bringing boys and men to the table, but they don't want to talk necessarily always to me, from my perspective, about women's issues. They're talking to each other on the issues that are important from their voice.
Do you think there are some laws, rules, and regulations against the women's rights and immigration rights in this country that you are fighting with or trying to change?
Well, one of the so there's a couple ways to answer that question. One of the things that we worked on specifically is the Violence Against Women Act and having it reauthorized. Going through the whole reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act that is reauthorized every, I think, 5 years. Every time it's reauthorized, and it's supposed to be reauthorized for the purposes 5 or 10 years. It's reauthorized for the purposes of strengthening it each time. And what we found in this particular conversation was the the hatred, and and the fact that a conversation that is really about domestic violence survivors. I mean, how do you get to such a hatred conversation? And I think that the hatred happens when there's fear and misunderstanding. So we came out with a study on the Violence Against Women Act and what it means to Latina immigrant women and immigrant women in general, right? So trying to build information, facts, real data. Then you've got the people who just want to hide the real facts and for their own reasons, right? But So your question was, how, is there any laws and specific regulations that are against women's rights? I think it comes down to, so in this country, we know that a woman, a Caucasian woman, makes 70 cents to $1 that every Caucasian man makes. A Latina woman or an immigrant woman will make, it's like 40 something cents to the dollar that that white Caucasian man made. So there might not be a rules and regulation against it, right? But there's inequities. So when you have policies that keep, that make it more difficult for someone to get away with paying someone less, you know, then the idea is, how do we create just policies is what we're working towards, right? In the area of, if you're speaking directly about immigration reform, one of the things that we're fighting for, and in the Senate bill there is an increase of U visas, and that's important to us because we work with a number of rape survivors and victims of crime. So that's important, increasing that number.
What is the U visa for?
The U visa is a status to apply for if you are a victim of a crime. So in the case of, we have cases where women who are undocumented have been taken advantage of, and whether it's in a workforce because they know they're undocumented, or they were a victim of crime because they know, well, they're undocumented, they're not going to speak up. If they will participate in the in filing charges in the investigation, then they could be on the track for applying for a U visa and towards their residency in this country. So, any other? Yeah.
Any other questions?
So, so I guess the conversation that we had was a little bit on the heavy side, right? But going back to the importance of understanding, you know, commonalities. You know, so we're all part of a family, right? We all can relate to being either a mother, a son, a daughter, a sister, a brother, and we have commonalities. What we don't necessarily always have the opportunity to do is to share the dialogue of those commonalities, to find ground where we can be partners and be allies. And the examples I gave you are very specific to the work that we do at our organization, but they could be related to education. They could be related to topics of healthcare, where there are other forms of disparity in the areas of healthcare, where there are communities that have similarities, right? So when you think of diabetes and heart disease in certain Arab communities, you know, that's pretty high. And diabetes and heart disease is a pretty big issue amongst Latinas. Why aren't we talking about it as communities dealing with the same issues, right? I mean, we're not. I mean, but those are points of bridging, even from the perspective of health. I talked about immigration, but it could be, you know, anyone. It's a nice, beautiful, warm day out there, and I so appreciate you still coming and listening. So any other questions? No? No. Okay.
You did mention something about providing just laws that will prevent discrimination. Do you think something like this does exist that's 100% fair, that will make everybody, will prevent discrimination? Because I think there is no such things. We always try to improvise, but it's not possible to be to a point where this 100% fair. What do you think about that?
You know, so it reminds me of the work that we do in our state capital and in our nation's capital with our legislators, whether it's a city level, state level, national level, and there's these bills that are presented for just laws of all sorts, and you have different perspectives of what's just and what's not just, right? and they're presented, and they might be passed, and then there's all these different interests, and depending on those interests, it might move, it might not move. And yet it starts all over. You get a bill, you might get a law, and it's passed, and you celebrate, and then come next session, it starts all over again. And I used to think of it as, oh my goodness, it starts all over again. But it's really a process which allows us to really step back and make sure that we strengthen, like the Violence Against Women Act, right? Strengthen it. Yes, it came at a point where it became uglier for a certain time, but there are also, we can look towards other years where it really was strengthened each time it was reviewed. And it was strengthened bipartisanly. So maybe I'm highly optimistic, but I'm optimistic even more so because of our youth. And looking at the involvement of and the awareness of youth in general for looking for justice, but also to be involved, right? To be a part of a solution. So the fact that my son would get an email or information on Facebook or what have you about your mom speaking at the American Islamic University or college, then from a Jewish Council of Urban Affairs member, and he is a very Catholic Mexican of Mexican descent and Native American descent. There's a beauty in that, and he's involved with these circles because they're interested in specific issues that impact our society.
Last question for me anyway. I don't know if you're aware, or people in this room are also aware, but one of the largest, or actually the fastest growing Muslim population in the United States are actually Latinos. Yeah. So you're aware.
Yes. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Yeah. And they're the fastest growing converts, and now you have people who are, having children, so, people who are my age, sort of millennial, generational, Muslims who are from Latino backgrounds, who are indigenous to, the continent of the United States. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about what roles they can play. I mean, depending on the families that they're from, sometimes they become disconnected from their Latino heritage, and sometimes a lot of converts decide to disconnect from their previous cultural background. But at least the people who are my friends are really connected to their Latino heritages and are connected to their Islamic faith. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about, what role they can play in this as well?
Sure. So I mentioned this already to Dr. Ali Yurtsever, the story, but from a family perspective, I have a cousin, my first cousin, Herman, who fell in love with this young woman in Bridgeview, whose family is from Palestine. And so he went to the imam, and he was going to convert because he wanted to marry her. He wanted to do it the right way. Well, he said, no, you can't convert. You can't convert for the purposes of just getting married with somebody. That's not a real reason to convert. And so he left very sad, and so she said, if this can't happen, we can't get married, and that was that. Well, he was very sad for a while, and then a few years later, he meets another woman, another young woman who's from Colombia, whose parents are from Egypt. And so things change, and they were able to get married. And so she jokes and says that the first girlfriend she really was there to prepare him for all the traditions for them two to get married. So it's interesting. It's happening also through marriage. And I happen to have another very good friend, Yolanda, who chose to convert. And I remember having a wonderful women's circles with her, because she was one of the first friends that I had that converted from Catholicism and shared with me why she chose to. And she was, we would have the most wonderful women's circles and talking about spirituality. I really appreciate those conversations with Yolanda. But why is it happening? Well, when I give you the numbers of demographics, it's just going to happen naturally. You know, I also could talk to you about my nephew, who is half Mexican, half Serbian, and he is Orthodox. His Orthodox Christian, and so there, you know, our country is very diverse, and we have choices, and you know, I think that's the beauty of this country. But the idea of building those opportunities to learn from each other and respect why people choose what they choose to is important. But you know, I don't know if that answered. I mean, I can't answer why people do what they do, but I can tell you about my experiences with those that are close to me have been very authentic and wonderful experiences, and even within the Latino community, they are natural builders, as you say, into the Muslim communities, who don't see themselves as that. I mean, it's the same with the African American and Latino communities, that there are these natural builders, and we're in the midst of it, and we don't. They just are. They're just a Latino Muslim, and they don't see themselves as a political bridge. They're who they are. But those of us that are in the work, going back to those relationships and points of intersections, it is our responsibility to connect with them and help them and ask how they can connect us, right?
So the Latino community is planning to choose their president in 2020?
Yeah, well, let's. I gave you the numbers. Let's hope that the numbers are one thing. Let's make sure that people are continuously involved. But yes, I think the Latinos will be very much involved with the decision of the next president. But we also should be all involved with the local elections that sometimes are even more impactful than the national elections. And as to
how is that so far?
Pardon me?
How is that so far?
You know, I think we're getting there. I think we need to get more folks in office, you know, and beginning in places, again, those who don't, just as we said, and as I said, people don't see themselves as politicians, right? It begins with, I'm just a parent who's concerned about my child's education. I think I'll be involved with the school board. And that becomes a launch, right? So they're natural. I think the best folks to be in these offices are people who really are in depth and there because it's beyond being a politician, right? They're just a parent wanting to be on the school board. Yes. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's actually relevant to what you do, but there is a notion that the promotion of women's rights is usually is a secular enterprise, like feminism, you know, is something that has diverged from religion. They're basically going against it. But I know Hind is a feminist herself, and I know that she is one of those who she's one of those who promote women's rights through her beliefs. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts about that are.
I think that's a good question. So I mentioned I'm Catholic, and you could certainly say all sorts of things about Catholicism related to that, because I can only speak about my experience, right? So on our staff, we have a woman on our staff who is a Catholic nun, and very much involved with. Would you say that she one day woke up and said, "I'm going to be a feminist"? No. But she works on issues related to women and families, basic human needs, access to health care, and yes, choice. So she happens to be of an order as a Catholic nun who works towards, for her every day is very much around that justice. And I think sometimes we get stuck on labeling and separating, and so I could say, to me, I don't wake up one day and say I'm a Catholic, and so I'm not going to make sure that I don't want any more. Birth control is not an option. That's not the reality of most Catholics. So I think we complicate things with labeling, as opposed to and I don't know if I'm being real clear, but one would think within Catholicism that women not having the right to be priests, not having the right to do that it is anti-feminist. Yet there is a woman that I just give an example of who is very involved with just and feminism within our organization. So we could get stuck to say, oh, let's rule her out, because what could she do as a Catholic nun? But it's not about that label, it's about her actions and what she does through those actions. And I'm not a religion, I'm the worst person to talk about religion, but from that perspective, that's mine.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a small gift for you.
Oh, that's...
Token of our appreciation.
Oh my goodness.
This is from our Ebru class.
Oh my
It's original Ebru heart.
Oh my
We
goodness.
generally do it in Turkey. So this is the water marbling, you call it.
Oh
Have
my-
you seen before?
I have not, but it's beautiful. I've seen it before, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's tulip, and tulips are very famous in Turkey and Netherlands. So thank you very much for your informative talk.
Thank you. The
And we
tulips are
learned
my
a lot.
favorite flowers.
Oh, great.
So thank you. Thank
We-
you
we
very,
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you. Thank you.